That non-compete means you don't write a single line of code for a year. The CTO sneered across the polished oak table. I just smiled, because in that moment, while he was still gloating, certain he had clipped my wings, I already knew how this would end. 12 months later, in a courtroom heavy with silence, the judge read one sentence from a newly passed state law. Their lawyer's jaw dropped. He turned to me, eyes wide, and whispered to his client, "She knew. The whole time she knew." When I first joined the company, the CTO wasn't my enemy. He was my mentor, a brilliant architect, a man who told me I had the sharpest mind he'd ever hired. I stayed late nights, writing code that turned fragile prototypes into living products. He called me indispensable. I believed him, trusted him. That's why the betrayal burned. The first cut was quiet, a meeting I wasn't invited to. Notes from a roadmap session where my name was absent, my work discussed like it had materialized from thin air. Then the contract renewal, my base salary frozen, equity clawed back. And then, the final strike. The non-compete clause shoved across the table like a weapon. "Sign it," he said, "or walk." 12 months barred from my craft. No coding, no startups, no side projects. A cage built out of legal ink. I signed. Not out of defeat, out of patience. Because cages rot and contracts bleed. I didn't waste time raging. Rage was his language, not mine. I studied state law, legislative updates, court rulings buried in PDFs no executive would bother reading. And there it was, a bill creeping through committees drafted to protect workers from abusive non-competes. A bill I knew had enough momentum to pass before my year was up. While he thought he had locked me down, I was counting votes in the state assembly. Every smirk he gave me, every time he dismissed me as benched, I filed away like data. Noise, feeding the inevitable signal. I obeyed the contract, publicly at least. I didn't write code, I didn't freelance, I didn't touch a repository that could be traced. But I studied the market. I mapped problems waiting to be solved. I designed architectures in notebooks, never compiling a single line. Paper doesn't violate a non-compete. Thought doesn't either. By the time 12 months crawled past, I wasn't starved. I was sharpened. And just as the cage door creaked open, the law changed. Courtrooms smell like dust and coffee. He sat across from me, smug, confident, his legal team stacked with suits who charged by the hour. They thought this was routine, enforcement hearing, open and shut. Their lawyer began with thunder. "Your Honor, the defendant signed a clear non-compete. She is barred from engaging in any competitive activity for 1 year. She violated this agreement." I didn't flinch, because I knew what was coming. The judge flipped a page, adjusted his glasses, and read aloud. Pursuant to State Statute 23.47, effective as of last quarter, non-compete agreements restricting employment are void and unenforceable. The courtroom fell still. The CTO's lawyer blinked. His face drained color. He stammered, tried to object, tried to spin. But the law was inked, clean, simple, final. He turned to his client, whispering with trembling lips, "She knew. The whole time she knew." I didn't smile. Not then. Smiling would have been too small for the moment. Instead, I met the CTO's eyes. He wasn't angry. Not yet. Anger would come later when the consequences sank in. What I saw first was fear. The realization that every move he made, every condescending remark, every sneer across every table, had been met not with ignorance, but calculation. He thought I was caged, but I was biding time. He thought I was powerless, but I was watching the ground shift beneath his feet. And now, in this courtroom, in front of his peers, his board, his investors, he wasn't the predator. He was the fool. The judge dismissed the case in minutes. Outside, reporters asked questions. I gave none. Silence was enough. The law spoke louder than I ever could. Back at home, I opened my notebook, the one filled with sketches, systems, ideas born in the shadows of that enforced year. And for the first time, I turned thought into action. Code flowed again, not chained to his empire, but free. He had tried to bury me in silence. Instead, he gave me the quiet to build sharper weapons. The truth about cages? They don't stop predators. They create tacticians. He thought that non-compete ended me, but all it did was give me 12 months to prepare his ending. And the day his lawyer whispered those words, she knew. The whole time she knew. That was the day I stopped being his employee and became his reckoning.